Yeah, so it was this really pivotal moment the night of January 5 into the early hours of January 6 when Trump picked up the phone call from the White House, according to our sources, and instructed his political operatives at the Willard Hotel to find ways to stop the certification from taking place at all at the joint session of Congress on January 6. And if you speak to Trump's allies, they say, this is not a big deal. He was just trying to find ways to delay the certification, to fight another day. But I always thought this was a really disingenuous characterization because either way, whether it was through action or inaction, he managed to get the certification stopped. And the Capitol was attacked. And now it's going to loom large in the committee's investigation if they can get the records from the Supreme Court.
So, Hugo, two questions about the former president. First is, what's the timetable to when we'll get a decision from the Supreme Court as to whether those records will be turned over?
Yeah, so the committee has asked the Supreme Court for an expedited decision in this National Archives case. Trump's claiming executive privilege over a couple hundred documents that are held from the previous administration. So I think we're looking at a decision probably in the spring if they grant it, which I think they're likely to do if you talk to members on the committee, counsel on the committee, and counsel for Trump as well. So I think that's the timeline roughly you're looking at.
So it seems also that this is a classic investigation where you start with the small fish, leading you up to the big one. And it does seem like in recent weeks there was growing focus on Trump personally and what he was doing. It's not just about Meadows and Bannon anymore. It's the former president himself. The people you've talked to, you're obviously very well sourced in this. What is the growing likelihood that some sort of action will be taken against Trump personally?
I think it's increasingly becoming more likely because they are looking at criminal referrals for the former president. They're still looking at Bannon and they're still looking at Giuliani and Eastman, and these were the guys in the Willard that Trump called up on the night of January 5 and sought advice from, right? There were multiple war rooms at the Willard. There was one with Eastman and Giuliani and Bannon, and there were separate ones with people like Flynn and Roger Stone and Alex Jones, and there was like a massive operation happening at the Willard.
Plenty of rooms available, apparently.
Plenty of rooms available, and it was just across the street from the White House, as you know, and then the Treasury Department. So it was a stone's throw from the White House right up Pennsylvania Avenue, up to the Capitol. So this is going to loom really pivotally, I think, in the investigation. But it's true, they are now focusing on the culpability of Trump himself and whether he directed the Willard to then direct the Capitol attack, and if there was some sort of unlawful conspiracy.
So, Hugo, just to kind of spell that all out for us a bit more in terms of that phone call and what the Select Committee might be able to actually find out from the records. I mean, presumably, if they can get hold of the records from the National Archives, they could find out what time it was made and who it was made to. But how are they going to find out what the content of that phone call was? Because if they can't find out the content of that phone call, how much good is it?
So I think this is the key question. I caught up with the chairman of the Select Committee, Benny Thompson, before Congress broke for recess a couple of weeks ago, and he told me, and we say this in the story, that they are going to ask the National Archives for all of the White House's communications from January 5 and January 6. And if Trump made that call to the Willard, or those calls to the Willard, because he called the lawyers separately and the political operatives separately, then those calls would be reflected in those records. The trouble is, of course, that they're just records. They tell you the time, the date, the duration of the calls, and the intended targets, but they don't give you a transcript, they don't tell you the content of those calls. So short of the committee interviewing and getting depositions and testimony from people involved in the Willard operation, I think it's very, very difficult for them to find out the contents of the calls. I think there's one caveat, and that is if someone like Bannon or Eastman or Giuliani talked to other people and they then are deposed by the committee, an aide, an advisor, and they can inform the committee what they learned from those people directly in the room, then maybe that's the way the committee goes.
So there's a lot of caveats here and a lot of things that have to happen for the committee to get the information it would need to find out, first of all, exactly what happened, and B, whether there was some actual conspiracy intent, premeditation around the attack on the Capitol. What's your sense, because you dig into this a lot, of how much work they have done and how much time they have left to cover the ground that they still have not yet covered? given that the midterms are, what, only 10 months away, 11 months away?
Yeah, so they're up against this deadline, and it's a hard deadline. It's the end of this Congress at the latest, because if Republicans retake the majority, this is the end of the committee. They're not going to want to reinstate the committee and the investigation. So they are up against this time limit. But they have amassed a real trove of evidence to date, right? They spoke to Meadows. He ultimately decided not to cooperate. But he did provide a trove of documents and communications and text messages, which we've only seen a sliver of. And those are already quite damning, and Trump is in a bit of a meltdown from what we understand down in Mar-a-Lago.